Good afternoon and welcome to this multi-location meeting of the Democratic Services Committee on Monday, 17th February. I'm Councillor Saifur Rahman and I'm the chair of this committee. Please ensure that your phone are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. In addition, when asked to raise your hand, if members who are virtually viewing this meeting could raise your electronic hand, and for members in the chamber, just raise your hand. Just to make you all aware, today's meeting will be recorded. So we're moving on to agenda item 1, declaration of interest. Are there any declaration of interest?
I can see no declarations, Chair.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So we now move on to agenda item 2, which are the minutes of previous meeting. Members, you will see the minutes attached at pages 5 to 12 of your agenda pack. If you feel these are an accurate record of the meeting, can I please have a proposer and a seconder to approve these minutes? Okay, thank you.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you for your hands. Thank you.
Sorry,
James.
Councillor Hinton, can you say that on mic,
Happy
please?
second.
That's fine. If members do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take that these minutes are approved.
I can confirm the minutes are approved, Chair.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, there's I can't see very well. Oh, Sonia, is it?
Yes, Chair. Yeah.
Sorry, Sonia, do you want to come in?
I know we don't normally do matters arising or anything, but I have concerns about whether any actions were taken on the discussion around the draft annual report on remuneration from the last meeting, and whether there was a more proactive approach being planned to help members with claiming childcare costs. It is an ongoing issue that I wanted to make sure was being actually addressed.
Okay. I can ask Stacey to respond to that. Sonia, if you just bear with me.
Well, do you want me to take that in line with item 3, because I have done an update on item 3 on that. So if I can just take those together, if that's okay. So
Certainly.
the eagle-eyed amongst you might notice that item 3 on the agenda is the final IRPW report that we were expecting to have come to us. Unfortunately, we haven't received it, so we have to defer the item, because usually we have the final report by this meeting every year. So we have to have it by the end of February. So whether they are just delayed slightly in the time frame. So unfortunately, I don't have that report to bring to you as hoped this afternoon. But we will obviously share that with members of Democratic Services Committee when that becomes available. Members will remember we looked at the draft back in November of the proposals. It's usually quite rare that they change from the draft proposals, but once we have the final proposals, then we will share them with committee. And from that, then, Councillor Reynolds, the intention is then to publicise that, link all of the council's policies and procedures with all of the IRPW recommendations, so childcare, claiming, expenses, those sorts of things. We'll launch those against the IRPW final report, if that makes sense, so we can link it back to the actual report. So hot off the press, as soon as it's available, that will roll out then as an action, if that's okay.
Thank you. Could it actually be, would it be helpful? I would like to see council officers actively contact those members that we know have childcare issues, and and discuss this with them about how they can go about claiming, because I think we need to be positive about it rather than just sending out information.
Yeah, I can certainly take that on board, Councillor Reynolds. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. So as you've heard, then the agenda item 3 will have to be deferred because we haven't received the report. Can I just ask, so we would have to hold another meeting to go through that item then when it...
We do need to formally receive it in some format. There's no requirement that needs specifically for it to be done by the end of February, but we will try and see what the document ultimately will be and what scope we've got then, whether we can do it formally recorded in some additional way. Conscious we don't want to call a meeting just to look at something specific like that, but we'll try and look at it in the most pragmatic way that we can, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Craig. So moving on then, agenda item 4, forward work program. These are on pages 13 to 16. This is for noting. Anyone has any comment or any questions in relation to the forward work program? Can I just ask one? I just wanted to get a bit of an update with regards to the task and finish group we've undertook last year in relation to harassment and intimidation on councillors, and we did another one after that, diversity in democracy. Any update on this, Craig?
Of course. If I start then with the member harassment and intimidation one, at the last meeting, or maybe the one before, we agreed a sort of an action plan. Ultimately, and what we said we would do is we would bring it back then to Democratic Services Committee on a sort of an ad hoc basis to monitor the compliance against different aspects of it. So a lot of that now work has been progressing. So there will be a report now coming back to show us for the action plan, what's done, what we're in the middle of, and what we're still ultimately to do. Two other issues which are ongoing potentially at the moment is there is some work that is ultimately now underway at the Welsh Government and WLGA level, specifically in the concept of member intimidation and harassment. It's good to see that it's getting recognised now at the national level, meaning that we've got different processes and protocols which will also come forward as a result of Welsh Government. And there's a meeting that's due to take place in March on an all Wales basis that will specifically look at these issues and what more ultimately can be undertaken. I was in a meeting last week where the Cabinet Secretary was in attendance, and they've recognised that it is one of the priorities ultimately they want to take forward. We've also had some named representatives who've come forward from Welsh Government through their contacts with South Wales Police, who are specifically looking at some member issues. So we're in the process of looking at an all-member seminar as well to discuss those matters. So lots of work's been going on in the background, but we'll be bringing in the next update as to what's undertaken and what we're still to do at our next meeting, Chair. But it's all coming together quite well. Diversity and democracy, we had our first meeting of the task and finish group just before the Christmas break. I think it was in November time. We're going to bring together a second meeting now of that task and finish group, because one of the things we discussed we wanted to look at more was how we could gather information to identify barriers, to identify those various issues, so we can try and promote inclusivity then and more diversity in our democracy going forward. And again, Welsh Government are actually doing a little bit of work at the moment, so we can link it all in. So we hope to convene that next task and finish group in the course of the next few weeks and months. I'm conscious at the moment we've got lots of different meetings with involving members in where we're getting their views on various aspects, so we're trying not to overwhelm members with the number of meetings as well they were asked to attend, but that work is ultimately progressing at this stage.
Thank you, Craig. Do members have anything further to add to the forward work program? No? Okay. Moving on then to item number 5, urgent items. I have no urgent items, so we now move on to part 2 of the agenda, which is item 6, Levelling Up Fund Round 3, Princess Royal Theatre, update to elected members. Can I thank the officers from regeneration team and property team for attending today. So who am I handing this over to? Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, as part of the Levelling Up programme, in round 3, we were granted approval to do the scheme in Port Talbot. That was broadly split into 3 areas. The first one being the refurbishment of the sort of right-hand side of the building, if you like, as you look at the Civic Centre. So it's the theatre in the main, but we're also able to include some of the periphery areas around that, like the committee rooms upstairs and some of the other ancillary space. But it did not, it was never in scope that it was the left-hand side of the building, which is the offices side, because that is not and couldn't form part of the criteria for a bid. But as part of that package as well, we were going to redo the square and have some proposals around that, and also the land going, what we call Riverside, which is where you've got the post office in Port Talbot, and the land going down there alongside the river. As part of the programme, as we started to get costs in, And as you know, with most construction projects at the moment, costs are rising northwards pretty quickly. We realised that to keep it within scope and within budget, we were not going to be able to include the riverside part. But as it happens, there may be other proposals around that area anyway, which may come forward in due course. So it would have been something that we might have omitted later on in any event. So what we're talking about today really is just to give you a bit of an overview on the proposed works, and particularly really how they would affect members, the community generally, and other stakeholders, including local businesses, in terms of their use of the square, the theatre, etc. So, as members may know, this building was constructed in 1987, and as you can see when you look around, including this room, we haven't done a great deal since then. So other than sort of just a little bit of repair and maintenance type stuff, most of the building is generally in the place that it was in terms of how we set it up back in 1987. And as everyone will understand, the world has moved on immeasurably in what is almost 40 years, because it was being designed in the mid to sort of early to mid 80s and constructed and finished by 87. So generally speaking, if you look, and we'll just deal with the right hand side of the building today, obviously, the internal fit out there in the theatre is quite tired. The M&E, the mechanical and electrical works in there, have struggled for a few years, and Darren is here from the theatre side and will to tell you that, you know, sometimes it's too hot, it's too cold, really hard to judge that properly with the kit that we've got. So we wanted to, when we looked at the theatre and came up with the proposals, we wanted to address a number of key areas. One was a technical issue around rear stage access, which hampers a lot of the local productions, etc., and has been a constant bugbear for those who've used it for many, many years. At the moment, they have to do a sort of comedy routine where they run up the stairs and then over the top of the landing and come back down the other side. So it's not really ideal, and it's caused Darren and his team a few issues. Then we've got the sort of backstage facilities, I suppose. The dressing rooms have not been of a sufficient standard and quality and size, etc., to accommodate some of the performances that we put on. And there's insufficient toilet facilities there as well, bearing in mind the numbers of people that we've got who can attend the theatre. I think capacity is around about the sort of 750 mark, and we don't have sufficient toilet facilities there. And the toilet facilities that are there, there's not enough disabled space, etc., to cope with with our current clientele. And then one of the big issues that we identified when we started looking at the theatre quite a few years ago was around the secondary spend. What we really need to do is to make sure that the theatre is as sustainable as possible. And one of the issues around that is how we take money off people once they've come in to see a show. And so that means the drink sales and even small sales of food and all those sorts of things that can be done when you have better facilities. So a big part of it is about enlarging the front of the building as well, and also making it more of a statement. Because I don't know if anybody's seen the visuals for how the theatre will look going forward, but at the moment, unless you look closely and you see the signage above the door there, it's quite hard to tell it's a theatre. It just looks like it's part of our offices, and that was obviously the intention when it was set out. So when the works take place, it will very clearly look like a theatre from front and back because of the extensions, and we'll have much more of a presence in the square area. So when we look at the plans for that ground area, we have increased the size of the toilets. We've increased the size of the secondary spend area. And when you see the visuals, you can see how that looks and feels. And it's a much more sort of user-friendly area in the front of the building. But also, as we move up into the building then, there are some impacts in the way that we've had to design the space and some of the impacts for members particularly. So if you looked at the first floor, for example, in the current proposals, we've had to reshape the mayor's parlour. As part of that, we've taken away the room that is currently the mayor's secretary, and we've incorporated that into the bigger space, but we've trimmed a bit off the back end of the mayor's parlour then, because we need that to make sure that the secondary spend facilities in the theatre can function correctly. As it happens, by doing that and taking away some of the areas like the little kitchen area that we've got in there, we don't lose an awful lot of space. And I think it probably makes it a more usable space in the building. So we've been consulting with Craig and with Stacey and the team around how that would work in terms of the mayoral facilities. And I think the discussion that we had was, I suppose the mayor's facilities were set out, as you say, back in the mid-80s when and I joined the local authority in the early 90s, and it was a very different place then, and the types of events that happened in the mayor's parlour were very different events. And I think from those that I've attended over the years, I've often found that the space that we have within that room is not always the right type of space for the event that they're trying to stage at that time. I mean, if you look at Neath, for example, when we have the fair event there every year, the Neath Fair event, it's standing room only basically in there, and then people are spilled out onto the corridors because the space is totally insufficient for the event that you're trying to put on. So as part of the proposals, and I'll touch on this in a second, what we're looking at is not only having the mayor's parlour, but creating other spaces in the theatre side that are good, high quality space that could be used for events as well going forward. So depending on the event that the mayor has going forward, they might choose not to use the mayor's parlour. They might choose to use one of the other facilities in the building, which may be more suitable for that particular type of event that they're trying to put on. Also on the first floor, we've significantly enlarged, improved the toilets, and put disabled toilet facilities in there. And what I should mention as well, because it came up when we did the briefing with the group leaders, is one of the questions we were asked was around disabled access in the building generally. And the lifts that we have here in the building are obviously of the size that they were in 87, and they don't always fit the types of things that people are trying to put into them in terms of scooters and various different bits. And it's hard when you get in there to turn around with a wheelchair and all those sorts of things. So in the facility, Clive and I have been talking about this. The new lift facility there does two things. Firstly, it's an evacuation lift, so it can be used if we have a fire. And at the moment, if you're on the first floor here, on the theatre side of the building, you would have to rely on somebody who can get you out of the building in an evac chair. So you are relying on others, whereas the lift can operate during a fire procedure. And the second thing is we've made it as large as possible so that depending on the type of scooter and buggy type thing you have, we're pretty sure that it'll accommodate most of those, because it's, I think it was 2 meters by 1400. Yeah. So it's a fairly large space and significantly bigger than the lifts that we currently have. Then moving on to the second floor, what we've got there is, at the moment, as you know, we've got 3 committee rooms and a members room. The members room, again, the way that we use that within the council has changed quite a lot, I think, in the last, well, certainly since it was designed in the 80s, but particularly probably in the last 10 years. A lot of the meetings that we do now are like this one. They're hybrid meetings. We probably have less demand on that space than we used to. And as a consequence, we're looking to reconfigure that slightly as well and trim that down slightly, change the types of facilities that are in there. So taking away the kitchen area, but putting in an appropriate tea and coffee making facility that that members can use. But also then that will allow us to change the configuration of the 3 committee rooms into 2 committee rooms, one of a very high standard that could be used by either the mayor for functions or could be used for teams. I know from my point of view, when we have inward investment meetings with the chief exec, etc., and you've got you've got potential investors in the area coming in, having that sort of space is very useful compared to that which we probably have now. So it would also allow us then, I mean, one of the constant bugbears we have in meetings is the audiovisual kit doesn't function for some reason because it's mobile and it's all different. So coming up with standard fixed audiovisual equipment that also we're looking as well for, from Stacey and Craig's point of view, is whether that type of facility could be used for broadcasting going forward as well, because although we only broadcast some meetings at the moment, there may be a call for us to broadcast more going forward. And of course, when we're doing meetings where you've got people from various parts of the country, having that ability to use the facilities in the way that they should do now is very important to us, I think, as for just staff and for members alike. So what we're looking at there is slightly reduced member facilities, but revamped with new kitting, etc. But and what we've said is, that's a discussion then with the members and with Craig and with Stacey to see what the members want in that facility going forward. And that's exactly the same with the Mayor's Parlour as well. Are we reproducing what we've got now, and change, or are you looking for a different facility going forward? Do you need something different? Because obviously it's from the 1980s. I don't know whether that's what members see as the thing they want going forward, or whether you need to change it. We are entirely open, and that is for discussion with the members. It's be the members' direction that we will take on that. I probably should mention as well, and I mentioned earlier, the Mayor's Secretary's room going, and the Mayor's Secretary will relocate into Stacey's committee room team to give more resilience in that area as well, which we think is probably a good thing going forward. So as I said, things like the Mayor's Parlour, that's only marginally smaller, about 10 metres squared, which is broadly around about 15%. But with a better layout, we think that it can be a more usable space. The committee rooms, we think that space will be much better going forward. The members' room, I think, drops from about 71 square metres at the moment to 57 square metres. So not a huge drop, but something that would be noticeable. But I think what it does give us in the whole of this is an opportunity to revamp it completely and give you what you need for now and hopefully for the next foreseeable future in there. I mean, that could be different IT kit, whether you want more desk space in there or more sort of soft seating around collaboration and just meeting up for a chat before meetings. We are entirely within your hands. So that gives you a broad overview of where we are with the theatre and the member facilities and how it affects this side of the building. Obviously, from Clive's point of view as well, there will be various phasing through the building, and Clive can talk you through that if you want to know any questions around how we phase things. And I think one of the big things we want to tell you is, I suppose, with all of these projects, there's going to be disruption going forward. It is absolutely unavoidable. The level of that disruption is quite hard for us to gauge accurately at the moment. We'll be doing a fair bit of physical works that side of the building. As you know, for those who've been here, when there are little bits and pieces going on, that noise does transfer quite quickly through this building. So that can be a challenge. And also, we'll be doing works out in the square at different phases. So we've got a sort of plan B, if you like, around certain things. Members may or may not be aware that we recently commenced some works in the Quays. For those of you who've been to the Quays, the ground floor office, which used to be Dave Griffiths' team, we are splitting that into 3 areas of meeting space. So that will be available just before we commence the works here, in case we need a plan B, because what we can't have, obviously, is members trying to meet, and there's, a JCB out in the square, or the drills are going mad and nobody can hear what's going on, and people online can't hear what's going on. So we've had to think about that. And also in terms of staffing, we've also got a plan B in terms of, we've got one spare floor plate in the Quays at the moment, which is just being kitted out with all the monitors, etc., so that if staff who are working in this side of the building find it too difficult to work and they can't work at home for any reason, that there's a place that they can go to. So when people have asked us how noisy will it be, we honestly can't tell you. But what we can tell you is there will be noise and there will be disruption. Other disruption will be, for example, the car park. We are taking away, because we'll need a site compound and different things, part of the car park will be tied up with that. So we go down from about 60 odd spaces down to 24 for the interim. That's only whilst the works are ongoing. Once they're finished, we'll be going back up then to the 60 spaces. So I think unless there's anything else. So we are liaising, obviously, in terms of the local stakeholders as well, with the church and with the shopping centre and with Pobble, who look after the housing in the old Aberafon house there. So we're trying to cover all bases. Or the other thing I should mention as well, full council, which is every 6 weeks. We have agreed with the contractor that this room will be available, and they will not down tools, but they will stop doing anything that's noisy for that couple of hours whilst that's on, so you can carry on doing that and have that in the building. That said, of course, it'll be get there early to get your parking space, because there'll only be 24 of them. So we will have to manage the car park in a slightly different way, and I think there's plans in place for the members to be able to access the multi-storey car park with permits, etc. So that'll be an interim arrangement around that. So I think that's it, unless I've missed anything, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Simon, for your detailed report on this. Sonia, did you have a question?
Yes, I've got several. Sorry, Simon.
That's okay.
As I understood that, then, Simon, there won't be any changes to this chamber itself.
There aren't any changes to this chamber into this phase of the works, but of course, after we've done that, we'll be looking then at how we refurb the left-hand side of the building. And funny enough, Clive and myself and I was just talking to Craig and Stacey before the meeting. One of the issues with the chamber here, as members will be aware, is around disabled access. We need to resolve that. It just so happens that we haven't had that particular sort of imperative so far, but it will happen to us at some point, and we will need people to be able to access all areas of the chamber, hopefully, who've got whatever disability. So we will be looking at some point, I think, in the not too distant future, at how we do that. Our current thinking is we probably will level it up. So instead of it being tiered, it'll be on all one level. And I was just talking to Stacey and Craig before the meeting started, and what we need to make sure is, of course, it's very difficult, certainly in some of the areas, because it's quite tight. If you wanted to come in with a wheelchair, for example, that's a really difficult thing to do. And we talked around about whether, could we drop any numbers of seats in here, for example? But of course, we need to make sure that everybody can be accommodated as well. So we're going to have to think that through and see what can be achieved. Obviously, in an ideal world, everyone will be able to sit within their group parties as well. But we just have to make sure that we can do that safely.
Thank you, Simon. If I may, Chair, could we or just make an urging for bigger screens and better positioned screens within that as well? The hybrid workings in the chamber are frankly awful when you're trying to work there, as Saif has just demonstrated by saying things like, I can't see, so it's problematic. And, very much if you're a member trying to sit in the chamber and work and see who's voting or who's doing what and who's online, etc. Is there going to be any additional use made of the Neath facilities?
Yes, the meeting rooms there will be available, of course, and that will be down to sort of Stacey and Craig, I guess, in terms of organisation as to where they want to stage meetings with those spaces that are available. Happy to pass that over to Craig and Stacey if they've got any further comment.
Yeah, so absolutely, Councillor. So there's two elements specifically that obviously will impact Neath. Obviously, we have the Mayor's Parlour, which is based in Talbot Civic at the moment, but we do have a Mayor's Parlour in the Neath building. So that will become the de facto official Mayor's Parlour, shall we say, ultimately, whilst the works are that are ongoing. But what we're also doing is creating a base ultimately in Talbot as well. So there'll be an office that the Mayor is capable of using, just to make sure we're retaining that presence ultimately in two buildings. We're looking at committee rooms. Now I always forget this. Is it A and B or is it 1 and 2? Committee rooms A and B, which is the larger venue ultimately in Neath, also having some of the hybrid equipment ultimately be installed there in a better setting, ultimately with the microphones and everything like that will be needed. So that can become a de facto committee room if we needed it for any major basis. Our intention at the moment is obviously we will have the presentation room, as we call it, downstairs, also kitted out to be able to accommodate our meetings, which would normally take place in the chamber with the exception of full council. But as Simon mentioned, we are concerned about the potential noise disruption. So Neath is going to be included in our plan B as well, and we can make a determination then whether a meeting is better placed to take place in Neath or Talbot, depending on the need. But we are hopeful that we will have 2 or 3 rooms kitted out ready to be able to accommodate what we need from a hybrid perspective as well. So we got that maximum flexibility going forward.
Thank you. If I could, Chair, I wanted to also make a point about the refreshment facilities for members. I'm one of the few members, I travel a long way to come into council, and quite often I organise several meetings to try and make sure that I travel, efficiently. And therefore I spend time in the members' room, and I want to be able to have a cup of coffee, to get some lunch, something like that. The facilities need to be adequate. At the moment, they're not really. And if I have to bring another cafetiere and equipment in that doesn't then disappear from the room, it will be wonderful. I seem to have to keep re-kitting out and things vanish from that facility. So decent tea and coffee facilities for members, because don't mind paying for them, it just needs to be available. And also the car parking is crucial to me. I can't get there by public transport. 5-hour journey if I try and do it by public transport. So it's got to be a car. And having it during this process, 24 parking spaces, quite often I'm struggling for a car parking space now. So there has to be good arrangements for car parking for members. Otherwise, it's going to be a real problem. And the other thing I wanted to know a bit more about was what's happening on the first floor here. We have labour rooms. What will be happening to those?
There we go then. If I come in, I can try and take off those. Absolutely. The issue of refreshments, ultimately, we want to take members' views as to what sort of facilities they are going to be wanting in their new members' room in that sense. So it's the ideal opportunity for us to engage with all members to look at the support element that ultimately comes with it. And we're very happy to be guided by what members need, what members want, to be able to see then what avenues we can put that. In some ways, we'll be starting with a little bit of a blank canvas in that room, so we can make sure that it's kitted and designed in what members need. As Simon mentioned, is it workstations, is it more sofas for communication? We can take that ultimately from sort of that element there. Parking, absolutely, there will be some sort of restrictions in place. So what we'll be saying on things like full council day, that it will be members parking and they get the priority as we used to have previously, when we used to have a lot more members ultimately being attenders. But we've also been liaising with our transport team and traffic team. So the multi-storey car park will be extended, obviously, so members can park there during that duration, and the permit will cover them specifically within that multi-storey, obviously just across the road as well. With respect then of the labour rooms which you mentioned, there are a couple of different scenarios that we've been looking at. So the first being, obviously, for any larger group meetings, you have access to the presentation room as well within that meeting, for where you've got a significant number who will be in attendance. If you need to have meeting spaces for smaller numbers, say 10 members, 12 members, Democratic Services will be able to identify a room within the building, if you can just tell the dates ultimately that you will need those meetings. And we're also then creating an additional room which will be on the ground floor opposite the presentation room as a drop-in office, which can accommodate a few individuals in that sense, for some workstations at the same time as well. So just try to make sure that different types of facilities will be available dependent on particular need, and that's the same for all political groups. If people want a meeting room, they will go via Stacey and her team, and we'll be able to identify an appropriate conference room within the building that can be utilised. What we'll also be looking to do is, you may be aware that we have a room which is commonly known as the legal library multi-story in that sense, which sits the other side of the top floor here in Talbot. We're going to be kitting that room as a sort of an overflow room as well. So members who would usually have used maybe the members' room in the chamber will have a smaller room as well. Then they can base themselves in on a particular day if they need to, and it will be booked via or notified via the Democratic Services team as well. So hopefully there will be new facilities around the building, but the same elements of what members would have would still be available.
Thank you very much, Craig.
Okay, thank you. Can I just pick a point about the car park? So the multi-story car park will be available to members in addition. And our permit that we currently have allow us to park in multi-story car park, yes?
Indeed, Chair. We just need to make the arrangements, obviously, with our transport team to make sure all the members are notified in that sense, and you'll be covered. And the Dem Services team will sort that out with Ian Rees and the traffic manager, parking manager, sorry, in due course.
Thank you. I have Phil next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, a lot of planning needs to go into this, so thank you, Simon, and all the team for you've got to try and think of everything before it even happens. It's very difficult. Little thing to point out, you know, in our notes here, we don't have the first floor. We only have the ground floor and second floor. I think you're the same as well, Councillor, and I know we haven't got a map of the first floor that you were talking about earlier on. So if it'd be possible to forward that across.
Well, I can guarantee you there will be a first floor, so we will send that out. A mistake on our part. Sorry. I apologise.
Marvellous. Thanks. Obviously, on a personal note, it's lovely to see that we're using Neath a bit more. I can actually walk to it then, rather than using transport, keeping down my carbon footprint. I'll be using that. The other thing was about the multi-storey parking that come up. I did try and use it the other day, and there's not very good internet access there. I wasn't able to log on using my phone, so perhaps we need to have a little check of that before we go ahead with it. It's just, I'm just trying to iron out anything before it actually comes up, that's all. Is that okay? Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor Rogers. We'll pass that over to the parking manager and ask him to check with our digital services team. I don't know the reason why, but we'll see what we can find out.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next, can I ask Nathan, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question on the members' room. Similar to Sonia, I use that to work on my day job before I come into a meeting, and I'll go back there. So I would appreciate a hot desking facility is incorporated into the plans moving forward, even if it's 3 or 4 desks. I know I'm probably one of the few who do that, but it is very handy to have. So just to note rather than anything else. Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor John, and I think this is an important conversation we're going to have with members, probably via Democratic Services Committee in the course of the next year, when we're in a position to migrate back into that room. What is it the members actually want in there, so we can start planning accordingly? And that is one of the remit of Democratic Services Committee, to look at the support services that are available to members. So this will be the ideal forum to take that forward.
Thank you. I can see Councillor Caroline Lewis indicated. Caroline, do you want to come in now?
Yes, just a quick question. Yes, the plans seem well thought out. The question I have is regarding the Mayor's Parlour. Do we actually need one, or can't you just have a multi-functional room that's used for a range of things and, you know, booked out when it's needed by the Mayor's team?
Absolutely, you make a very valid point there, Councillor Lewis, and I think the key element at the moment is that we're trying to replicate a degree of what we have at the moment by making it modernised and suitable ultimately for the future. So the Mayor's Parlour is used on a variety of different types of events, because ultimately it's a civic function that the council does hold. So what we've tried to do is scale it back so it becomes a much more usable space ultimately that can be used for some of those different elements, with the bigger elements then being our overarching function rooms. But I think it's probably a discussion that we do need to be looking at as we sort of move forward, and you may see that we're doing work in respect of modernisation in general. As part of that, we have to consider the types of events we're holding in the building, the types of different functions that we involve the various different parties with. So no, it is a very valid point, but I think we're trying to replicate to extent what we have by making it more suitable ultimately, and more multi-function and multi-use of abilities in that sense as well. So whilst it's traditionally called the Mayor's Parlour, there'll be different ways ultimately we can look at trying to use that room within different elements going forward as well. So there isn't ownership that sits under just one individual at the same time.
Yeah, it'd be good over the next year just to keep a log. You probably have got a log of how often that room is actually used and by who, and then you can evaluate whether it needs to be called the mayor's parlour or whether it can be, you know, have a different term maybe or something like that. So yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon, oh, sorry, I think I probably have to ask Craig about this webcasting. This is the only room that allows webcasting. Can I ask is it I think you call them conference rooms, is it? Downstairs, the new rooms? Yeah, they don't have webcasting facilities, is it?
They don't have webcasting facilities at the moment, but it's something we are trying to explore. As you can imagine, webcasting services are very costly. Ultimately, in that sense, we need to make sure we're getting the best use of what we have and what we would need. But we've been doing some interesting tests over the course of the last week or two, where provided there is an officer in here controlling the webcasting equipment, they can dial into meetings. So that will enable a meeting that is held, for example, in our presentation room that is held in Neath to simultaneously be webcast, provided an officer can get access to this room to be able to use our computer station here. So we're planning for every eventuality in that sense as well. So if we were ever in the scenario where the disruption and noise, irrespective of them stopping on a Wednesday for full council, becomes unmanageable, we still have some fallbacks as well. That we can still meet the legal requirements in respect of webcasting. But one of the programs of work we are looking at the moment in general are our sort of decision-making processes, the modernization group in particular, who's doing some work in that regard, and we're talking about things like webcasting and what more ultimately we can do into promoting inclusivity and decision-making. And if it's the case we do need to consider other options, we can start bringing those forward. We did look into the possibility of having a mobile webcasting equipment, but we realized we would probably need a van to be able to courier it back and forth ultimately with the various venues with all the equipment that it brings. But it's something we do need to explore going forward.
Chair, as well, if I can just add, we are under contract with Public Eye, as you know, for the equipment in here, and we have a set amount of webcast hours with that contract. So when we choose, if we choose to webcast more meetings, that will result in an increased cost with the provider. So that's just a whole other discussion for us to have going forward, but that's certainly the way it is going. So it's just a whole discussion to have in terms of facilities, costs, resources, etc. But yeah, we are considering it on top of everything else. Thank you.
Simon?
Yeah, one thing I didn't add, perhaps, and it's a smallish point, but I think it's quite important, is that one of the things that we've identified in the last year or so is that most of the meeting rooms that we have got sort of bit that can be rearranged into different configurations, etc. But predominantly, it doesn't move. It stays in the same place all the time, but that makes it very difficult then to cable up for some things. So, for instance, here we obviously got all the microphones out. Well, it's very difficult to do that when you've got kit that can move all the time. So we may well be looking at making some of those rooms more fixed, looking at the kit in them. One of the big challenges we have with a lot of the rooms is that we have power on the outside of the room and we don't have any power to the desk in the middle. Stacey's laughing because I nearly killed Jane Woodman Ralph about 2 weeks ago because she tripped over my lead, which I've apologized for many times. But we are looking to make sure that we need to present things as they are needed from now on. So the rooms have to change. And if that means putting more fixed kit in than having mobile kit, then I think that's a good step forward.
I can't see anybody else got any questions or comments. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming today to explain the plans. I think it's inevitable that we're going to have to face some disruption, no doubt. But we're really excited with this new development that's going to take place. So thank you very much. This item is for noting, members. Before I close the meeting, can I just remind you that we have a session straight after this, which I believe Stacey and Craig will be leading. And with that note, there are no further items, and I now close the meeting. Thank you.